I can't drive 55. Let's talk about the burden of proof. One of the reasons why the definition of atheism has been changed is so that atheists can avoid the burden of proof. Well, what is the burden of proof? The burden of proof simply means that you have the burden, i.e. the responsibility, to prove, in other words, to offer evidence and arguments for whatever it is you have stated to be a fact. You say, this is so, or this is not so. The burden of proof says, well, why do you believe that? Or why should anybody else? Give me reasons to believe. So why do we declare things to be or not to be? Very simply, either you have been persuaded by evidence, reason, logic, or trusted authority, or something like that, or you are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Now again, I am talking about an intellectual position. I'm talking about someone who says, this is a fact, I know this to be so. Either you've been persuaded by evidence, reason, and logic, or you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Bum, bum, bum. What atheism fears the most? Atheism has failed to provide convincing proofs for itself for hundreds of years. Thus, modern atheists have changed the definition of the word atheist to avoid having the burden of proof. According to the new internet atheism, atheism is merely a lack of belief in or about God or gods. Atheism is to theism what not stamp collecting is to stamp collecting. It's not a thing, it's just a lack of your thing. We don't have your thing, so we don't have to prove anything because we just don't have. The new atheism motto is, we have nothing to prove. And they don't know how right they are. There's no cops out here, woo! See, many atheists can't find God for the same reason many criminals can't find a policeman. If I make myself believe there are no cops on the road, it's easier to let myself go as fast as I want. But if you try to make me read the speed limit signs, I'll get mad at you. It's not a hard metaphor to understand, kids. Pretty much that simple. Let's talk about the Cosmic Teapot. A whole lot of people have decided that this is a knockdown argument against us silly theists. But what's with the teapot? Well, the teapot comes from Bertrand Russell, who in 1958 said this: nobody can prove that there is not between the Earth and Mars a China Teapot, revolving in an elliptical orbit. But nobody thinks this sufficiently likely to be taken into account in practice. I think the Christian God just as unlikely. Boom! Pwned, Christians! Your God is just as unlikely as a China Teapot orbiting the sun between the Earth and Mars. Yeah, in your face! Let's examine the teapot. Point number one of this argument is the teapot, which is entirely possible. I don't think anyone would argue that the existence of a China Teapot is really to be brought into question. I think we can accept the first premise, a China Teapot. Alright, moving on. Point number two, orbiting the sun between the Earth and Mars. We understand orbiting and agree it's possible. The laws of physics seem to indicate that orbiting is a verifiably real thing. We know that the Earth exists, we're fairly certain that Mars exists, and we know that the Earth is not touching Mars. Thus, we know there is a space between the Earth and Mars where something might orbit the sun. Point number three, let's combine these ideas into a single event, a teapot orbiting the sun between the Earth and Mars. A teapot, we agree, is possible. Orbiting the sun between the Earth and Mars is possible. Thus, there is nothing impossible about a teapot orbiting the sun between the Earth and Mars. Russell's Cosmic Teapot is plausible. Now let's consider replacing the teapot with a live elephant. A live elephant is possible, but a live elephant in space between Earth and Mars would immediately die. Thus, a live elephant orbiting the sun between Earth and Mars is impossible. Unlike the China Teapot, it's literally impossible that a live elephant be orbiting the sun between Earth and Mars. No Christian apologist nor passage of Scripture has ever suggested we must believe whatever we cannot disprove merely because we cannot disprove it. That would be stupid. So who is Russell arguing with in making this statement? See, this is a straw man. Instead of actually responding to the 2,000 years worth of Christian writings, apologetics from the church, explaining why we can know for certain that God exists and the Bible is true, Russell has created this artificial version that does not exist anywhere, where the whole Christian position is, well, I don't know any good reasons to say God doesn't exist, so I guess Jesus rose from the dead after 3 days. And that's good enough. Nobody is saying that. So this whole Cosmic Teapot thing is a response to nothing. Also important to note here that the statement that Russell makes assumes at its premise that Russell cannot disprove the existence of God. Here's the ironic conclusion that many of our good friends on the internet have not considered. In saying, I think the Christian God just as unlikely, Russell has adopted the burden of proof and must give reasons why he feels the existence of God to be just as unlikely. That is a statement of fact from Russell. He's saying the Christian God is just as unlikely as this cosmic teapot. Well, if so, he has to explain why. He has to give reasons why. He now has the burden of proof to show that it's reasonable to say that the Christian God is just as unlikely as a cosmic teapot. Having not done so, he doesn't have a rational statement here. He's just being kooky dukes. The entire point of the Cosmic Teapot is admitting Russell doesn't like the existence of God. He wants to pretend that God isn't there. He wants to dismiss it, but he can't logically prove that God is absent. Because if he could logically prove that God was absent, he would not have come up with the Cosmic Teapot in the first place. Thus, in trying to show why he does not, as an atheist, have the burden of proof, Russell has adopted the burden of proof and admitted that he cannot rationally defend atheism or attack the existence of God. Russell has double failed!